Is this outflow an investment or an expense? We all spend money all the time. Right? Every month, money comes into our accounts and goes back out of our accounts, whether we're still working and that money coming in is earned income, or we're retired and that money's coming in through our retirement accounts and Social Security and pensions. Every single month, we have inflows and outflows. And when it comes to those outflows, a question that we should ask ourselves is, are these outflows an investment or an expense? And there are some obvious expenses and some obvious investments, but then there's some other things that are different. Things that maybe we think are expenses, but when we truly examine them, may in fact be an investment. And so today we want to talk about what are those differences and what are some things that maybe we should be investing more in that we currently are not because we think of them as an expense. Let's challenge what we mean by both of those things so that we can live lives closer to what we actually want. I think it comes back to, again, right, the motive of money, and that money is not the goal, right? Money funds the goal. The only reason that we earn money is because we like the things that we can do with money. And the only reason we save money is so that we can still do things in the future. And if we spend all of our money, if every single inflow that we have goes back out as an expense, then we'll never have anything for the future. And so one way to think about an expense versus an investment is that an expense is for now. It's money that we're spending right now. And an investment is money that we can then later turn into an expense later. Right? That the only reason we save anything at all is that so we have something for tomorrow to spend. And depending on how far out in the future that expense is going to be, will dictate how we save it. Right? If it's a short-term expense, right? If it's something that we can see in the foreseeable future, in the next month or 2 or 3 or 6, we may just put that in a savings account or just keep it in our checking. And that investment will just sit there until we're ready to turn that into an expense. Or if it's for something several years out, we may invest. Or if it's retirement that's still far out, we may invest. Or if we're already retired and we need this money because we're going to have expenses 10, 20, and 30 years from now while we're still retired, then we need some of that to be invested or to stay invested so that later we can turn it into an expense. And so there's really only two things we can do with money. We can expense it or we can invest it. Right? We can spend it or we can save it. And there are only those two things. And so anything that we are spending money on today, right, in these expenses, we have, fixed and variable expenses, things that always come every single month is the same thing, mortgage, etc. Variable expenses, what we might spend on groceries or gas or entertainment, these types of things. And of course, we have, required expenses such as taxes and maybe insurance and those, and discretionary expenses, things that we like to spend money on and would do more of if we could, but don't technically need to, right? And so there's lots of them that we enjoy, right? Lots of expenses that are enjoyable. Entertainment, eating out, food, and there's lots of things that are expenses. They're spending it right now, that we do enjoy. Some that we hate, right? Taxes. Nobody enjoys paying taxes. Doesn't matter what your opinion is of the person or people in charge of our government. Nobody likes paying taxes. And so we'd always pay the least amount that we can for that. And so we always have those expenses that we hate to pay. And then we have some that we don't maybe hate to pay, but we know we need to. And so we do it anyways, and it's neither here nor there. Whereas anything that's an investment is here again to spend tomorrow. Right, the savings line on our budget is not an expense. If you do, whether or not you budget or not, right, anything that you are putting into a Roth IRA for retirement or into your 401k before it even hits your bank account or into your savings, like these are not expenses. And I've had some people say that they're listing out all their expenses and they'll list some of their investments, some of the things that they're saving along with the rest of their expenses. And that's just not true. Like we need to separate these in our minds because investments are not expenses. They are there so that we have something in the future to be able to do. And so even some other things, right, this starts to shift then even some of the other expenses that we may see in our budget, right? Like a Roth IRA is not an expense. the principal part of your mortgage is not an expense. It's an investment into the equity of your home, into that asset, right? Even the interest part of that is an expense, right? That's the cost of having to borrow that money instead of just being able to pay for your home with your own money. So the interest is an expense, but the principal part of a mortgage payment is not an expense. It's an investment. And for that matter, right? The principal part of a student loan payment, is that an investment or an expense? I would contend that it's an investment, that you are paying back, kind of retroactively investing in your education, in your then income potential, assuming you got a useful degree and actually finished, followed through with that investment, that principal part is actually an investment in yourself, and that you shouldn't treat your student loan payments entirely as an expense, but rather that a good portion of that is an investment. Again, the interest is an expense. That's the cost of not being able to pay for your education at the time that you had it. But at least part of that is really an investment. And so there's, never think of your monetary investments as expenses. And I think for a lot of us, like even just that mental shift, just changing the way that we view some of these line items, some of these outflows in our checking account or in our budget, changes our attitudes about it and can help us enjoy more what we're paying and how we are looking at these things. Then also truly seeing some of the expense, right? Maybe when you truly see the interest that you're paying, or you truly see some of these real expenses, that helps you evaluate, hey, is this actually important for us? But there are also, so there's some of these monetary investments that we can make, but there are also some non-monetary investments that we can make. We can make some alternative investments. And no, we're not talking about Bitcoin or precious metals or any of these other things. And we're also not talking about investing in equities inside of a retirement account, although we'll certainly want to do some of those. But having more money or more fun later, these aren't the only investments that we can make. There's this phrase, right? I don't remember who said it, but the phrase is something like, when your values are clear, decisions are easy. Right? When you know what you actually value, and they're your values, not what some marketing company has told you should value or should desire, should want, but when you really know your own values, then decisions are easy. And so if you know what you value, then the decisions of where to spend or invest money also become much easier. If money is here to fund goals, it's hard for that to do that when we don't know what our goals are. But if you're clear on your goals and what you really want out of life, if you're clear on your values, what is most important to you, your priorities, then some of these things are much easier to fund. And it's easier to switch maybe from spending as much as we do to investing more of it. And not just into savings accounts or investment accounts or those, but into just some of these true alternative investments. And so when we're clear on what we want, we can fund those things. And so what else could we invest in? Well, here's some examples, right? You could invest in yourself, right? Think about this, right? Is the gym membership that shows up every month in your checking account or on your credit card, is that an investment or an expense? Right? Is a gym membership, is that an investment or an expense? Well, if you don't use it, right? If you got a Planet Fitness membership a long time ago and it's charging you $10 a month and it just seems like too much of a hassle to cancel it, and you're definitely going to get back there at some point, right? That's an expense. It's just a waste of money. But if you are using it and you are genuinely getting in there, it's making you a healthier person and giving you more energy and more focus and more drive and all these things, then I would contend that that's an investment. That you're investing in yourself, and that gym membership is not an expense. It is, in fact, an investment. We did a whole episode, right, on health, investing in your greatest asset, which you can go back and find. I don't remember the number, but there'll be a link for it in the blog post for this article. So you can always go to retirementmentorship.com/86, because this is the 86th episode, and there'll be links to anything referenced inside of there. So we did a whole episode on that, right? Investing in yourself, and those truly are investments, right? I have a substantial home gym in my garage that was not cheap at all, but I'm out there almost every day, and I'm making that an investment in my health, in myself. And so that's something you could invest in, right? You can invest in your education, and not just higher education, right? Where you have to take tons of student loans and all that. I spend probably about $300 a year on Audible, on an Audible membership for books. Is that an investment or an expense? I consider it an investment, right? It's an investment in myself, in my growth, in my grit. It's almost all spent on nonfiction books, just to continue so I can grow and learn more. And some of it's related to my business, so I can be better for my clients and learn more of that. Some of it's related to marriage or other areas of my life that I want to progress in. And so for me, that $300 is not an expense, it's an investment. And I think for so many people, if we treat everything as an expense, and right, a lot of times for people who are conscious about their money and their budgeting and where it's going, like if we think of everything as expense, then we don't want to put money towards certain things that are actually in line with our values. Because, a lot of people think like, well, if you're budgeting, the whole point of budgeting is to reduce your expenses, right? And that people see that as the goal. The goal of budgeting is to reduce expenses and increase savings. But really, if we think about it more as, hey, yes, let's reduce some of our expenses, but so that we can invest more. And some of the things that we could invest in would be things that align with our values. And so if health is a value of yours, if education is a value of yours, if any of these things are true values, then putting money towards those things would be an investment, not an expense. And it makes it easier to be like, yes, you know what? I don't have to spend all my money on current day pleasures. I can invest some of that in myself. All right. Or you can invest in your marriage, right? Are those marriage books, conferences, date nights, retreats, vacations with just the two of you, are those expenses or those investments in your marriage and how you want to enjoy that other person, enjoy life? And if we just treat all these things as expenses and things that should be pushed down, that should be reduced so that we can throw more money into a retirement account, is that really the best use? Is that the best investment of all of those dollars? Right? You can invest in your family. Is that family cabin an investment or an expense? Well, if you rarely use it, right, and you're tired of all the maintenance and it just feels like a ton of extra work and nobody's finding joy there and all that, right, it might totally be an expense. But if it's a place where you're making memories as a family and memories that you'll be able to cherish and enjoy for the rest of your life and bonding your family together and your kids together in ways that you might not be able to do anywhere else, maybe it's not an expense. Maybe it's an investment in your family and cohesion and being that family team and whatever else, right? So if we're intentional with these things, it can turn a lot of expenses that should be reduced into investments that perhaps should be increased. So there's, there are many other things too that you could invest in besides just accounts and savings accounts and retirement accounts and all that. But of course, we have to be aware of the investment trap, right? Which is that this whole thing can be abused, this mindset of, and you can start to rationalize everything as an investment. Oh, I'm going to eat out because I'm going to invest in my own personal peace, and I feel too stressed out to make a meal or whatever else, right? There's a million excuses that we could come up with to abuse this idea of making an investment instead of an expense. So let's not do that, right? Think critically about anything that you're trying to claim in your mind is truly an investment and not an expense. You should really think critically about why you're coming to that conclusion. And I think to do that, we want to ask two questions about anything that we might think could be an investment and not an expense. And this would be, number one would be, will investing in this bring me closer to my long-term goals and values in this area? Will investing in this bring me closer to my long-term goals and values in this area? Right? So it's not just like a short-term, like, hey, I'm going to invest in this and then it's going to be gone and we have nothing to show for it, right? Like, Disney Plus subscription is not an investment, right? It's an expense to help you temporarily release some boredom. So that's not an expense. You're like, oh, we're building memories as a family. Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe if you're really doing that and you're all together watching family movies or whatever, maybe. But for most of these things, right, it's not really an expense because it doesn't build any long-term, it doesn't build you long-term towards what you think is most important in that area of life, right? And so will investing in this bring me closer to my long-term goals and values in this area? And the second question you could ask is is this investment in balance with my other goals and values? Is this investment in balance with my other goals and values? Because we are all operating with constraints, right? We all have a finite amount of income, whether it be the earned income that we're making or the amount that we're able to pull out of our retirement accounts. And we can't just go invest or spend as much as we want on whatever we want, right? We still have to balance those things. And so that brings me kind of to the last point here, right? That we have to strike a balance between what we're investing in. And so, one of your goals might be, hey, I want to retire someday. Like, I like what I do, but I can't do this forever. And at some point, I want the freedom to only go into work because I want to and not ever have to be in the point where I have to go to work even when I feel like I'm too old or just don't like it anymore. And so one of your values, one of your goals might genuinely be like, hey, I want the freedom, the financial freedom to be able to retire someday. And now I need to weigh that, right? Balance that out with, I also want to invest in my marriage. I want to invest in my family. I want to invest in myself. I want to invest in friendships. I want to invest in whatever else it might be. And of course, we need to balance those things out. And so how do we do both, right? And a lot of it comes down to, how do we cut or reduce just true expenses that we know are not really an investment in anything, and are just easy or frivolous or, accidental. They're just not intentional uses of our money. And so a lot of that, we can do that. We can do things to help make more money, so we have a little bit more to invest in things. We can, and I think, of course, right, being clear on what our values and our goals are. You can't work towards those things. You can't invest according to your values if you don't know what your values are. You can't invest towards your goals if you don't have any goals. And it's okay if you don't right now, because most people don't. But hopefully this might just inspire you a little bit that if we know what those things are, right, if our values are clear, then any decisions around that will be easy. And it's only when we don't know the balance of those things, when we can't rank order the priorities between a cabin and memories today with our kids and being able to still do things later in life because we're not working all the way until we're 80, we got to be able to balance those things out, right? And, are we only investing in retirement because we think that's what we're supposed to do, but in the end, we're not going to like who we're retired with, right? Either the person next to us because we never invested in our marriage at all, or the person in the mirror because you never invested in yourself at all and you don't like who you've become. And maybe you've got, right, tons of money and lots in your investments and your Roth IRA is thick, but you don't actually like yourself. You don't like your family. You don't like your marriage. You don't like so many of these other things because we only invested in one thing and we didn't invest in anything else. So we need to strike that balance. We need to find that balance. And I think that's the point of planning, right? That if the motive of money is to fund the goal, then the point of planning is to help give you more money to fund more goals, or to first to help clarify your goals and your values if you haven't done that, and then to plan out, okay, how do we make the best investments possible? How do we make money work as hard for us as we work for it, and any monetary investments that we're making, and how do we balance out what we're doing there and saving for future, investing right for future expenses? How do we balance that with what we want to invest in now for current day memories, current day experiences? And that's the point of planning, right? It's as Carl Richards says, right? It's true financial planning is aligning one's use of capital with their values. And that's part of what makes me so passionate about financial planning, what makes me want to do this podcast, which makes me want to write books and work with clients and all these things, is because I'm passionate about helping people to make the most of the money that they have, the money that they're earning, the money that they've saved, so that, right, not because money is the goal and having more of it is the goal, but so that you can live more of the life that you really want to live. And that's the great thing about that. So if you want any guidance with this, if you haven't really clarified your goals, if you don't really know, you kind of know your values, but if you had to list them, you wouldn't be able to quickly, you want help thinking through any of these things and then planning out how to properly invest, not just in retirement accounts, but also in your family and in yourself. And it just helps to bounce some of these ideas out, right? Go just sit down with your planner if you've got one. A good empathetic financial planner can help you work through some of these things. And or do it with your spouse or do it with a trusted friend or something, but really being able to bounce those ideas off people and really talk through them is a powerful way of just identifying your goals, clarifying your values, and making sure that we're investing in those things. And maybe through good planning, maybe we can all spend less on expenses and invest more in experiences and the things that we truly value.